This is the real case of the Titan Submersible, 2023, North Atlantic Ocean. Let us know in the comments which city and country you're watching from. They paid $250,000 each to dive into the abyss and never came back. Imagine spending $250,000 for an experience most people wouldn't dare to dream about. Diving to the graveyard of the Titanic. Now imagine doing it inside a vessel so experimental experts had warned it was a death trap. This isn't the plot of a science fiction film. It's what actually happened to 5 men who vanished beneath the surface of the Atlantic in June 2023, and whose story shocked the entire world. Among them was Stockton Rush, the CEO of OceanGate, a man who saw himself as a visionary pushing the boundaries of deep-sea tourism. With him, Hamish Harding, a thrill-seeking British billionaire, Shahzada Dawood and his 19-year-old son Suleiman, members of one of Pakistan's wealthiest families, and Paul-Henri Nargeolet, a former French Navy diver with decades of Titanic exploration behind him. Together, they boarded a 6.7-meter carbon fiber submersible called the Titan, an experimental vessel designed to plunge over 12,000 feet down to the ocean floor, to the final resting place of the Titanic. But less than 2 hours into the dive, the Titan lost all communication, and that's when the world held its breath. What followed was a high-stakes, multinational search and rescue operation that captivated millions. Social media exploded with theories, hope, and dark humor. Newsrooms around the world shifted their focus to a race against time. The public watched, minute by minute, as ships, aircraft, and deep-sea robots combed the icy Atlantic, hoping to find signs of life in what was essentially a coffin lost to the deep. The story became a modern-day maritime mystery, until the chilling truth surfaced. Experts had warned OceanGate about the Titan's structural flaws for years. Engineers were ignored, red flags buried. Rush believed innovation meant breaking rules, and breaking rules, he said, meant progress. But in the ocean's crushing depths, there is no room for error, and what was marketed as the ultimate adventure turned out to be a death sentence. Now, we're going to walk you through everything they didn't want you to know. The ignored warnings, the silence in the water, the billionaires who vanished chasing history, and the devastating science behind a disaster that unfolded silently, in milliseconds. This is the story of how 5 men boarded a one-way trip into the deep, and what truly happened to the Titan. Because there's one detail nobody noticed during the investigation, and it changes everything. In the world of deep-sea exploration, one name echoed with both admiration and fear: Stockton Rush. At first glance, he seemed like the archetype of a Silicon Valley disruptor, bold, charismatic, and relentless. But Rush wasn't building apps or electric cars. He had a different obsession: the bottom of the ocean. And not just any part of it. He wanted to commercialize the Titanic. Stockton Rush believed that the ocean's most forbidden depths weren't a danger, but an opportunity. Trained as an aerospace engineer, he founded OceanGate in 2009 with a mission that bordered on madness: to make deep-sea travel as accessible as space tourism. But unlike Elon Musk or Jeff Bezos, Rush didn't care for traditional safety protocols or industry standards. In his mind, regulation was the enemy of innovation. And that's where the story begins to unravel. OceanGate's Titan wasn't certified by any maritime authority. In fact, Rush had openly criticized safety certifications as unnecessary bureaucracy. Instead of working with marine engineers, he hired interns. He built the submersible with experimental materials like carbon fiber, a material never before used at such depths. Why? Because it was lighter and cheaper. According to him, this was how progress happened. He once famously said, "At some point, safety is just pure waste." And yet, this didn't stop the wealthy and the curious from lining up to join his dives. Because there was something irresistible about the promise Rush made. You can be one of the few humans in history to see the Titanic with your own eyes. It was more than a sales pitch. It was a seduction. Those who joined these expeditions weren't just thrill seekers. They were people drawn to legacy, mystery, and status. Each seat on the Titan cost $250,000. And yet, despite the price and the danger, many considered it a bargain. It was history, immortality, bragging rights. Imagine the dinner conversations, the Instagram photos, the stories for future generations. But there was something else Rush never advertised. Behind the scenes, former OceanGate employees had raised concerns. One former director of marine operations even filed a formal complaint, stating that the vessel was not safe for human occupancy. Engineers warned about the carbon fiber hull, about the lack of rigorous testing, about shortcuts. But Stockton Rush dismissed them all. He called the critics fearmongers. And in June 2023, with full confidence and a curated roster of elite passengers, he launched what he believed would be another successful dive. It was framed as a milestone in human exploration, a tribute to innovation, a dream come true. But 1 hour and 45 minutes into the dive, the Titan vanished. No signal, no noise, no trace. Coming up next, how the world reacted to the silence and the dark twist in the rescue mission that no one saw coming. June 18, 2023. 8 a.m. local time. The Titan begins its descent into the Atlantic, launched from the Canadian research vessel Polar Prince, some 370 miles off the coast of Newfoundland. On board are 5 men, sealed inside a cylindrical capsule no larger than a minivan. They are diving toward the remains of the RMS Titanic, 3,800 meters below the surface. At first, everything seems routine. The descent is expected to take about 2.5 hours. Communication with the support vessel is limited to text messages via acoustic signals, slow, delayed, and vulnerable to interference. But 1 hour and 45 minutes into the dive, the messages stop. No signal, no GPS, no response. Initially, the crew aboard the Polar Prince assumes it's a technical glitch, a delay. Nothing to panic about. But as the minutes tick into hours, dread sets in. The Titan has vanished without a trace, and it's somewhere in one of the most hostile environments on Earth. News of the disappearance breaks by nightfall, and within hours, the world is watching. Suddenly, a private expedition has become an international rescue operation. The U.S., Coast Guard, Canadian authorities, and multiple deep-sea research teams scramble to locate the sub. Ships equipped with sonar, underwater drones, and aircraft begin sweeping the ocean. Experts calculate that the Titan has roughly 96 hours of oxygen, assuming all 5 passengers are still alive. The clock is ticking. Social media ignites. Memes flood Twitter. Hashtags trend. Billionaires lost at sea? It feels like something out of a Netflix miniseries, but underneath the jokes, something darker brews. A global obsession with whether the ultra-rich will survive a disaster of their own design. Meanwhile, experts warn that a rescue would be nearly impossible. The Titan could be anywhere, on the seafloor, trapped in the Titanic's wreckage, or floating somewhere unseen. Unlike traditional submarines, the Titan isn't equipped with a beacon, escape hatch, or location transponder. There is no way for the men inside to open the vessel from within. Even if they're alive, they are utterly dependent on rescue from above. Then, a strange glimmer of hope. On June 20th, sonar detects banging noises at 30-minute intervals. Could it be the crew tapping in Morse code? Could they still be alive, trapped in darkness, making noise in desperation? The media seizes on the discovery. News anchors speculate. Family members weep on camera. Hope surges across the world. But as hours pass, the banging remains unexplained and unconfirmed. And all the while, oxygen is running out. June 22nd. The 96-hour mark arrives. No new sounds, no communication, no signs of life. Then, just before noon, a U.S. Navy remotely operated vehicle, ROV, spots something scattered on the seafloor, just 1,600 feet from the Titanic's bow. Debris. What they find next sends a chill through the command center. Parts of the Titan, its tail cone, landing frame, and front-end dome, disintegrated, spread across the seabed. The vessel had suffered a catastrophic implosion. There were no survivors. But what caused the implosion? And why did no one stop this dive before it was too late? In the next chapter, we'll reveal the chilling science behind what happened to the Titan, and how one flaw in the vessel's design sealed the fate of all 5 men in just milliseconds. It didn't explode. It didn't leak. It imploded. To understand what really happened to the Titan, we need to dive into the crushing science of the deep ocean, an environment so extreme, so unforgiving, that even the smallest flaw becomes fatal. At the depth where the Titanic rests, approximately 3,800 meters, 12,500 feet, the water pressure is over 5,500 pounds per square inch. That's more than 380 times the atmospheric pressure at sea level. It's the equivalent of the weight of a skyscraper pressing on every square inch of the submersible's hull. Under these conditions, even a microscopic defect in the vessel's structure can trigger total collapse. This is what experts call catastrophic hull failure. And in Titan's case, it was always a matter of when, not if. The Titan was built using carbon fiber composite, wrapped around a titanium end cap. On paper, carbon fiber is strong and lightweight, but unlike metals, it's unpredictable under prolonged stress, especially when exposed to extreme, repeated compression at deep sea levels. Over time, the material can weaken at a molecular level, forming invisible delaminations, tiny separations between the fibers that grow with every dive. Think of it like bending a paperclip repeatedly until it breaks. Except here, the stakes are far higher. What made this even more dangerous is that the Titan had already made multiple dives in previous months. Engineers had expressed concern that the pressure cycles could be degrading the hull. Without proper non-destructive testing, those hidden weaknesses would remain undetected until the very moment the pressure became too much. And that moment came less than 2 hours into the dive. According to analysis by deep-sea specialists and the U.S. Navy, the Titan likely imploded in milliseconds. One microfracture opened, and the rest was instantaneous. The pressure outside the vessel rushed in at supersonic speed, crushing the sub and everything inside it faster than the human brain can process. There was no time to react, no pain, no awareness, just silence. The physics are brutal, but clear. At that depth, the force of the implosion generates an acoustic shockwave so violent it can vaporize metal. Human bodies? Obliterated. In less than 0.03 seconds, all 5 passengers were killed. Not by drowning, not by suffocation, but by an invisible wall of force that erased them from existence. But the real tragedy isn't just the science, it's the fact that this was entirely preventable. Experts like Rob McCallum, James Cameron, and even former OceanGate employees had all sounded the alarm. They warned that carbon fiber had never been proven safe for such depths, that Titan lacked certifications, that its experimental design violated every principle of submersible engineering. Yet OceanGate continued. Stockton Rush believed regulations stifled innovation, that rules were optional, that engineering could be overridden by optimism. He once said, "You don't get to the top of Mount Everest by playing it safe." But the ocean is not Everest. It doesn't forgive mistakes. And when it crushes, it leaves no trace. In the next part, we'll reveal the internal emails, whistleblower warnings, and the chain of ignored red flags that could have stopped the Titan from ever launching. Long before the Titan vanished, long before the world held its breath over 5 missing men, the warnings had already been written, and ignored. Back in 2018, OceanGate's own Director of Marine Operations, David Lockridge, issued a scathing internal report. He warned that the Titan was not only unfit for deep-sea travel, it was outright dangerous. His concerns? The carbon fiber hull hadn't undergone proper pressure testing. The viewport was only certified to 1,300 meters, less than a third of the depth needed to reach the Titanic. And worst of all, the company refused to conduct non-destructive testing that could reveal hidden flaws in the vessel's structure. Lockridge was fired just days after speaking out. OceanGate sued him, claimed he had leaked confidential information. But behind closed doors, his warnings lingered like a ticking time bomb. And he wasn't alone. Multiple industry experts, submarine engineers, maritime researchers, and former Navy officials voiced concern. Deep-sea exploration legend James Cameron, director of the 1997 Titanic film, and a man who has piloted dozens of dives to the actual wreck, called the Titan's design a hull wrapped in hubris. Others questioned why OceanGate refused to have the sub certified by established maritime safety groups like DNV or ABS. The company's excuse: certification would take too long and limit innovation. OceanGate even published a blog post claiming that bringing an outside entity up to speed on every innovation before it is put into real-world testing is anathema to rapid innovation. In simpler terms, we don't want anyone checking our work. It was a philosophy that valued speed over scrutiny and branding over basic engineering. Behind the scenes, Stockton Rush cultivated an image of a bold pioneer, but his decisions reveal something far more dangerous: willful blindness. He dismissed critics as traditionalists. He claimed safety regulations were for people too afraid to take risks. And in interviews, he compared himself to SpaceX, insisting that breakthrough technology required discomfort and occasional failure. But space has escape plans, parachutes, abort systems. The ocean has none. As the Titan continued making dives, more former employees quietly stepped away. Some refused to be part of further expeditions. Others went public, anonymously, warning the media that a disaster was inevitable. One wrote, "It's only a matter of time before someone dies." They were right. On June 18, 2023, that time arrived. What's chilling is that every technical failure had already been predicted, every flaw documented, every risk debated. And yet, it still happened. Coming up in Part 6. Who were the passengers aboard the Titan? And why did they agree to join such a dangerous journey? Their motivations may surprise you, and one of them didn't even want to go. They weren't just tourists, they were visionaries, thrill seekers, fathers, sons, each one drawn to the Titan by something deeper than curiosity. To understand why 5 people would willingly board an uncertified submersible to dive 12,500 feet into darkness, we need to look at who they were and what they were chasing. Hamish Harding, 58, was a British billionaire, pilot, and record-setting adventurer. He had been to the South Pole, flew in a jet around the Earth in under 48 hours, and even traveled to space aboard Jeff Bezos' Blue Origin capsule. Harding was driven by a desire to push limits: physical, mental, technological. The dive to the Titanic was just another frontier in a long list of extreme achievements. He posted proudly on Instagram just before departure, "A weather window has opened up and we are going to attempt a dive tomorrow." He knew the risks. He embraced them. Then there was Paul-Henri Nargeolet, 77, a former French Navy commander known as Mr. Titanic. He had completed over 35 dives to the wreck. To him, the Titanic was sacred ground. He wasn't a thrill seeker. He was a historian, protector of the past. His presence gave legitimacy to the expedition. If Nargeolet trusted the Titan, others felt they could too. Next, Shahzada Dawood, 48, one of Pakistan's wealthiest men, and his son Suleiman, just 19. Shahzada was a businessman and philanthropist. Suleiman, a college student, loved solving Rubik's Cubes and playing volleyball. According to family, Shahzada had a deep fascination with the Titanic story and saw the dive as a once-in-a-lifetime bonding experience with his son. But here's the heartbreaking twist. Suleiman didn't want to go. According to his aunt, Suleiman had expressed fear about the dive. He thought the sub looked unsafe. He agreed to join the expedition only to please his father. For Father's Day, he brought a Rubik's Cube on board, hoping to solve it at the bottom of the ocean and break a world record. He never got the chance. And finally, Stockton Rush himself. Not just the pilot, not just the CEO, but the man who engineered the vessel they were all trusting with their lives. Rush didn't sit in the control room. He was inside the Titan, with them. Confident, unshaken. He believed so deeply in his mission that he put his own life on the line. But this wasn't courage. It was conviction, and that can be just as deadly. Inside the Titan, there were no seats. The 5 men sat on the floor, shoulder to shoulder. No windows except a small porthole. No GPS. Controlled by a $30 Logitech game controller. Once sealed shut, there was no way to open it from the inside. They carried 96 hours of oxygen, a few protein bars, and a bucket for a toilet. They laughed, took photos, recorded videos, and then silence. These were not reckless people. They were educated, powerful, and prepared. But they trusted the wrong man. They believed in the myth of progress over protocol. They thought money and intelligence could outmatch nature. They were wrong. In the next part, we'll explore how the public reacted and why this tragedy sparked a debate far beyond the ocean floor, from wealth inequality to media bias and the human obsession with elite disasters. When news of the Titan's disappearance broke, it didn't just dominate headlines, it hijacked the global conversation. For 4 days, the entire world was glued to updates, hoping, speculating, judging. From cable news to TikTok, the fate of 5 men trapped in a metal capsule at the bottom of the ocean became a shared obsession. But this wasn't just concern. It was something deeper, darker. It was spectacle. Social media flooded with memes. People compared the Titan to a billionaire coffin. Late-night hosts cracked jokes. TikTok users posted parodies. One said, "If I paid $250,000 to die underwater, I'd at least want snacks." Another, "Imagine getting killed by a Logitech controller." It was morbid humor, but it was viral. Why? Why did this tragedy feel entertaining? Some said it was because the passengers were ultra-wealthy, that their privilege insulated them from sympathy. People pointed out how the media gave wall-to-wall coverage to the Titan while ignoring far larger humanitarian crises. Just days earlier, a boat carrying over 500 refugees sank in the Mediterranean. Few headlines, fewer hashtags. Suddenly, the Titan story wasn't just about engineering failure. It was a mirror reflecting society's obsession with wealth, spectacle, and hierarchy. Who do we grieve? Who gets our attention? And why? Others defended the focus, arguing that human lives are human lives, that no one deserves to die, no matter how rich, that we should be questioning OceanGate's decisions, not mocking the dead. But the questions kept coming. Should deep-sea tourism even exist? Who regulates billionaires chasing death-defying experiences? Is this the future, where the ultra-rich buy danger like they buy yachts and rocket trips? And then came the documentaries. Within weeks, streaming platforms announced specials. Netflix, HBO, YouTube, all racing to tell the story of the Titan. Interviews with former OceanGate employees. 3D animations of the implosion. Family members speaking through tears. People wanted answers, but they also wanted closure, or maybe content. This was Titanic 2.0, except this time the sinking was real. and the cameras were everywhere. But there was one more twist. While the world focused on the passengers, few noticed what was happening behind closed doors. Investigations were underway, not just into OceanGate's engineering, but its business model, internal emails, and funding sources. Lawsuits were brewing, whistleblowers were talking, and questions were emerging about how close this company came to launching even more dives, with more passengers, before the tragedy finally stopped them. And one final chilling detail began circulating. The Titan may have imploded during its very first descent that day, meaning that the entire global search was not a rescue, but a recovery mission from the very beginning. In the final part, we'll reveal the legacy of the Titan disaster, what it changed, what it didn't, and the final unanswered question that still haunts experts today. The Titan is gone, crushed in silence, buried in the blackness of the Atlantic. But its story didn't end on the ocean floor. In the months following the implosion, the Titan disaster became more than a tragedy. It became a case study, a warning, and a symbol. Governments launched investigations. Maritime safety organizations held emergency meetings. OceanGate ceased all operations, and a single brutal truth echoed through every report. This was preventable. Engineers laid it out clearly. Certification was bypassed. Materials were experimental. Internal warnings were silenced. OceanGate operated outside the bounds of oversight, not because they had to, but because they chose to. And that choice cost 5 lives. The fallout was swift. New international regulations were proposed for private submersibles. Insurance companies reviewed their policies. Explorers, adventurers, and billionaires quietly canceled expeditions. Some questioned whether deep-sea tourism had any future at all. The message was simple. The ocean is not a playground, and innovation without accountability is a ticking bomb. But not everything changed. To this day, no formal laws prevent someone from building their own deep-sea craft and selling seats. Maritime law remains a patchwork of jurisdictions and loopholes. The Titan may have imploded, but the system that allowed it to exist, still intact. And then there's the legacy of those lost. Stockton Rush became a controversial figure, part pioneer, part pariah. Some still call him a visionary, others call him reckless. Hamish Harding's record-breaking adventures came to an abrupt, ironic end. Paul-Henri Nargeolet, the Titanic expert who survived decades of dives, met his end at the very site he loved most. Shahzada and Suleiman Dawood left behind a grieving family, and a haunting reminder that even the most powerful fathers can't protect their children from ambition's shadow. But the story doesn't just belong to them. It belongs to all of us who watched, who speculated, who joked, who mourned. The Titan was more than metal and bolts. It was a modern myth, a parable about human arrogance, wealth, legacy, and the depths we're willing to reach for glory. And yet one question still lingers, unanswered. What exactly caused the implosion? Was it the carbon fiber weakening over time? A single invisible crack? A design flaw no one saw? Or something deeper? Something we may never know because no black box was ever recovered. No final signal ever sent. The truth may be lost forever, sealed in the silence of the deep. But this we know. The ocean has no patience for ego, no mercy for ambition, and no forgiveness for mistakes. The Titan vanished beneath the waves, but its echo will be felt for generations.